everyone. I'm James Milan, and welcome to a special edition of Talk of the Town here at ACMi. And by special, I am meaning that we don't often get to speak with a public intellectual of the stature of our guest today. Dr. Eddie Glaude is a distinguished professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. In fact, was the inaugural head of that department and held that position for 14 years. He has more books than I'm going to go ahead and name right now. But the latest of those is what brought him or put us on his radar and him on ours. We want to thank our ACMi member, Greg Bartlett, and our friends at the local chapter of the NAACP here in the Medford area, who are bringing Dr. Glaude to Arlington's Regent Theater on June 1st for a moderated conversation and Q&A session. And with that, let me just start by saying, man, do I appreciate being able to talk with you today, Dr. Glaude.
Man, it's my pleasure. I'm looking looking forward to the conversation. Absolutely.
Let me start actually, because I do want to focus the majority of our conversation around this most recent work of yours and how it ties in with the most recent other books that you've come up with, which have put you in a particular space which encompasses both history and, let us say, politics and political, not just commentary, but analysis in our current moment, and also looking back over the long span, especially in your most recent book of the 250 years of our history, which we are just about to celebrate again, and which will be, it's amazing just how topical your book is. I know when books are written, even though you have been able to come out with one every couple of years for the last few years, I know that there is a lag, obviously, oftentimes between the content of the book and when the publication happens. In this case, it's amazing, the resonance of the work, given what we are looking forward to this summer. All right, sorry for all this talking. Let me get you to talk. Let me ask you to begin with. I noticed in reading about you in preparation for the interview that you came to Princeton as a doctoral student in religion. And I assume that you still teach courses in that
Mm-hmm.
field.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm actually the former president of the American Academy of Religion, the largest organization or body of scholars of religion in the world. I tend to work at the intersection of the philosophy of religion and African American studies, or African American politics, or African American history. So, religion is a point of entry, or, for me, for a wide range of subjects, and that can take a number of different shapes. But the most important for me is keeping track of moral and ethical claims. I'm always the arc of my work always lands, I think, in a space where I'm principally concerned about moral and ethical issues.
And yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to explore initially in the conversation, is just the clear connections between your devotion to the field of religion, religious studies, and as you've just outlined them, and what it is that connects you from there to doing the work that you've been doing, looking at African American history, of course, which part of your point of a number of your books, as far as I understand, is certainly that American history is African American history, whether certain people want to acknowledge that or not. And holding, again, those claims, holding people's words and actions, especially prominent people's, especially, let's say, presidents of the country's words and actions up against, as you said, that kind of moral compass that a lot of religions and faiths provide, just to say, how is that looking?
Mhm.
So In that way, and with the understanding again that sense of a moral compass is something that you bring to the work that we are going to be talking about. Let's go ahead and delve into the kind of both the structure and the content of America, comma USA. And let me
Mhm.
start actually by just asking you, that is a notable or a noteworthy or an eye-catching, in a sense, title, clearly deliberately chosen. Talk to us about that to begin with.
Oh, well, that's a great question. I mean, the title is actually a reflection of one of the central claims of the book. The comma is doing a lot of work. We've talked about hyphenated identities, or, we know about hyphenated identities, African American, Irish American, Italian American. But I'm saying the comma is something different. There's a break that kind of reflects the divided soul of the nation. America imagines itself as a beacon of freedom and as a white republic. And those two positions can't be held together at once without contradiction, without a kind of depositing a kind of madness at the heart of the country.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, the America USA, the comma, is trying to register the split between these two ideas of the country. Um, another kind of, well, it's not a kind of, another inspiration for the title is John Dos Passos's trilogy, USA.
You say, hmm.
Yeah, it's considered an epic account of, early 20th century America, prior to up into the great, the Great Depression, the crash of the stock market and the like of the global economy. And, Dos Passos is his reach, right? He's trying to tell this amazingly complex story of the country by focusing on ordinary folks and their own challenges. But he's silent with regards to the issue of race for the most part. Black folk are
As
not.
are other contemporary authors from
Oh,
that period,
absolutely.
who
He's
we
not.
all
He's
know. Yeah.
not. He's not alone
Hmm.
in this regard. So the book is in conversation with what Dos Passos is up to. And like USA, which is a trilogy. It's three novels.
Hmm.
This is the third in my trilogy. The first was Democracy in Black. The second was Begin Again, and now this one. These three books are all trying to figure out, trying to think through, offer new language for how we might understand ourselves as Americans, and how we might understand the American project as such.
Yeah, and the particular take in America, comma USA, is to look at, well, actually, I'm not going to describe it. I'm going to ask you to.
Right. So thanks. It's hard to imagine how one tells the 250-year history of the country. I'm not Jill Lepore in this regard, and and my interests uh, kind of are can be telescoped. I'm trying to figure out something. That is, how did we arrive here in this 250th year, where race seems to animate so much of our current days. It motivates so much of the cruelty and grievance that we're experiencing. And so what I wanted to do is to kind of look back at the milestone anniversaries, the centennial um, in 1876, the sesquicentennial in 1926, the bicentennial in 1976, and of course, the semiquincentennial coming up this July 4th. And in each of these moments, the nation has to tell itself a story about its founding. And in each of these moments, historically, the issue of race has overwhelmed the story. So you think about 1876. I mean, this is the collapse of Reconstruction. The Hayes-Tilden
Hmm.
Compromise will come the next year, 1877. 600,000 or plus dead on sea in on land and on the seas as a result of the carnage of the Civil War. And the country has to tell itself a story. And it's this massive act of disremembering, a kind of disappearance of the reason why all of this violence was unleashed on the land. Or 1926, this is, the 1920s is they're often thought of as, the Jazz Age, the Charleston and the like, but this is really the
Sure.
period of the Klan.
Of the Klan, absolutely.
The Immigration Act of 1924 and the like. And so I wanted to kind of think through this moment in the book, right, where the Klan was initially approved to hold its annual convention, right, at the heart of the Philadelphia Exposition, which was celebrating the 150th anniversary of the nation. So they were going to celebrate the flag and burn crosses at the same time.
Hmm.
And then, of course, in 1976, this is Vietnam, this is Watergate, this is Black Power, this is this deep skepticism about the promise of the nation. And of course, you get that moment in Boston with the anti-busing protest, with the iconic Old Glory photograph of the young teenager attacking the black lawyer with the American
With
flag.
the flag. Hmm.
So I wanted to look at these milestone anniversaries to kind of say, well, what are we doing? And how might we see what Mark Twain might describe as the rhyming of history
Hmm.
in our own moment? And in that moment, I get and with that approach, I've kind of quilted a story, stitched together a story of the country over the last 250 years.
Yeah, and I have to say, a a wonderful job of doing such in it's the way it hit me was in this way, and I'm sure I speak for many readers present and to come of your work. Uh, I have taught and studied American history for decades, and I covered all those events in some form as part of that, long thread of our country's 250 years. I did not kind of impose the frame, or I shouldn't say
Mhm.
impose, find the frame that you chose for that. And as soon as you did, like with other pieces of small, I hope you don't not uncomfortable, other pieces of small genius that are out there,
Mm.
I heard that and I thought, oh my goodness, absolutely, each one of those points works beautifully
Oh.
to illustrate your idea of the madness, and that is exactly the right word, the madness that is even at the center of this experiment that we all celebrate periodically in the way that you're just talking about with the various big anniversaries, but
Mhm.
also, as we all know, very generally, whether you're talking about the kind of indoctrination that MAGA Republicans accuse the American school system of having, even within that indoctrination in which we are trying to make room for all of the hypocrisy
Mhm.
and kind of double dealing that you describe so well. Even within that liberal orthodoxy that is being attacked so much, we have this sense that this was a grand experiment that doesn't have the kind of internal contradictions and things that are just hard, impossible to reconcile.
Mhm.
There's still a glossing over, even as we try and make ourselves look harder at the reality of it. Work such as yours and the way you make your arguments as a public intellectual uh, puts that in people's faces.
Yeah.
I've heard about the description of the way that you approach things in your books, in your
Mhm.
public appearances, is he pulls no punches. That's a quite a common descriptor.
Mhm.
And I feel like, of course, that's more important now. That's always been important. And one of
Mhm.
the things that I know has come up in your work is that you connect us and connect this moment all the way back to the time of the founding to say, no, not everybody went along with this,
Yeah.
including not every enslaved black, American went along with this
Right.
right from the beginning. And I think that really resonates for me personally, and I think for a lot of people at this moment
Oh, well,
in our
thank you so
history.
much for saying that. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm trying, as a writer, what I'm trying to do, as a writer who's obsessed, history obsessed, what I'm trying to do at every turn is to scour the archive, uh, to give us a better account of our current moment. Every present is in need of an account of itself,
Hmm.
right? And how might I stitched together a particular, set of archival sources that could give us shine a different light on where we are. It's like holding these two things in at once, right? That the moment is uh, wholly unprecedented and yet eerily familiar.
Hmm.
And I wanted to try to find a way to account for that. And so, like the old quilts of slaves who used to try to escape the plantation, I quilted together this I stitched together this quilt to point us in certain directions, to tell us this is where we might need to go in order to understand Trump, MAGA, and this story that we're telling ourselves in the 250th year of the nation.
So that's you have used a couple of times that analogy of stitching a quilt in terms of the book. I'm curious about whether that quilt was stitched as you sewed, or whether you had that sense that this was the framing for this particular, third piece of your
Yeah.
trilogy.
No, no, it took me a while to get it together. I was doing all of this reading. In some ways, you hit it when in your remarks, right? As a historian, a lot of this stuff is familiar. I didn't discover anything new in the archive. What I did was I reread it, and that's the stitching, the
Hmm.
interpretive frame. And so I've been reading all of this stuff. I knew I wanted to write about the contemporary moment, but it was too dynamic, it's too fluid. I couldn't get my hands around it. And then, I kept hearing about the 250th that was coming. And then that became the hook. Um, and so I said, oh, okay, this is the way I can do this. And then I engaged in this manic effort. I wrote the book in 9 months.
That's astonishing,
I just,
right?
I
I mean, that's
just,
a lot. You've written a number of books now. I assume that is a pace that you do not
I've
often set for
never,
yourself.
I've never done it before. It was, I had the ideas, I had a draft, but when it finally came, a draft of a chapter or two, but when it finally came together, I just put my head down and just wrote. And at the same time, I had to explain the argument to my editor at Crown. So I think to answer the question more directly, it emerged, it evolved. And once I got a sense of the argument, the through line,
Hmm.
everything came together. Then I just started sewing, if that makes sense.
Madly, madly, with multiple, with the most kind of hyper driven sewing machine we know, because really that is a remarkable accomplishment unto itself. Um, as uh, as you were, you know, as this is happening, and again, I wonder how a person can do that in that amount of time, especially given the rest of your life. It is not like you are sitting down to devote yourself to write the writing of this book and you have no other obligations. Among the various obligations of your job, to teach the students that you do and to do all of the grading and all that stuff. You are, as I have mentioned a couple of times, a public intellectual at this point.
Mhm.
You appear on TV regularly on kinds of things that our audience here in Arlington is very familiar with, whether it's Meet the Press or various MS Now shows,
Mhm.
um, et cetera. And that's going to take up a certain amount of your time and energy, et cetera. I'm wondering how do you feel about that piece of the work that you're doing, especially because, as you said, you are drawn to history. You are based, you find your bedrock in your study of religion, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and and now you are asked to comment on uh, current events,
Right.
I would think on a daily basis. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
how
So
do you find, how did you like, was that a surprise to find yourself in that situation? And
no,
how
not
is
at
it
all.
for you?
It is certainly exactly how I imagined my scholarly life. My dissertation advisor was Cornell West.
Hmm.
Uh, I am a philosophical pragmatist. So, you know, particularly a scholar of John Dewey. If you read In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism and the Politics of Black America, I'm thinking with Dewey about these African American sources. And there's this wonderful essay that always shapes how I think about my work, written by Dewey, entitled "The Influence of Darwin on Philosophy." And in that essay, he makes this claim. He says that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the philosopher at her best is the philosopher that brings his or her skill set to bear on the problems of men and women. So the arc of the work is always public facing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm on television and I'm trying to bring the full weight of my bibliography to bear on a problem in front of us, the aim is to shift the center of gravity of the conversation, but I'm also thinking about, an idea in public with others. That's what I take public intellectual work to be about, right? To think in public with others. When I'm teaching, and a lot of the stuff I'm teaching shows up in the book, right? I quote one of my students from her final paper in my Baldwin seminar in the conclusion of the book.
Mm.
Um, there's this kind of churning that's happening, right? As I'm at my computer, um, where I'm trying to make sense of an essay that I might have taught and how that then shapes an idea, right? In the text, the way in which I'm thinking about sentimentality and rage in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's all organically linked. I don't see myself doing something wholly apart from my scholarship when I'm on television or when I'm speaking around the country. I see it as part of the vocation as I understand it. And that is my task is to bear witness, right, with the skill set that I have to the problems we face as a country and to bring to light as best as I can the power of the tradition that means so much to me, to think through it and with it, right? And sometimes against it, to make sense of and to open up new vistas for us to become better people, right? To become better human beings. That's that moral
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
emphasis, right? So all of it to me is a piece of something. All of it's one, right? And
Yeah.
just on the
And the
spectrum.
cross pollination that happens,
Exactly.
through the work that you're doing, both on television or around, as you say, appearing around the country, and then hunched over your computer at your desk, having all of that stuff kind of whirl away and find expression, as it has and as it does for you. It sounds exciting and inspiring, in a lot of ways. Um, I want to go back a little bit to, talking about the book and
Hmm.
the structure of the book, and the fact that my understanding is that Grant in 1876, and then Coolidge, and then Ford, and certainly what we can anticipate, it seems, coming up here, the narratives, the story, as you have said, that we are telling ourselves, or that they are telling themselves on our behalf, or something, is really a a whitewashing,
Hmm.
for lack of a better term. Um, and again, I feel like we are all, in the state of anticipatory dread, right now, about what form that is going to take and how much of it we are going to be subjected to in these coming months. Um, just talk a little bit about that for folks who haven't read the book.
Hmm.
How, again, that through, you've mentioned the through line, but you make it so powerfully. You make that point so powerfully through
Thank
using
you.
these.
Thank you. I mean, I think in each of these moments, there are voices that try to offer a coherent story of the nation, that these stories are aimed at producing consensus over and against the experience of the roiling chaos that is American
Hmm.
democracy, right? And the more that chaos bubbles up, the stronger the appeal to consensus is. So, so America's civil religion, as Robert Bellah describes it, right, is this kind of rendering of the American project as kind of being undergirded by these metaphysical principles, right? These principles that aren't reducible to the political machinations of Jefferson and Madison, but they reflect these enduring
Enduring truths, right,
these
right.
enduring
Just tapped
truths.
into these universals, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so you tell this story because then America isn't just simply a political project, right? It's a divinely sanctioned experiment. And so coming out of the carnage of the Civil War, you have Grant, right, trying to say that the country has come of age, right? That we finally answered Emerson's call for America to be distinct, right, as he did in the Harvard Divinity School address and the
Hmm.
American Scholar, right? There's a sense in which Grant is offering this account of America's technological prowess, its innovative sensibilities, its extraordinary um, capacity, unbounded in so many ways. But in order to do that, he has to disappear black folk.
Hmm.
He has to ignore the reasons for the Civil War itself. Frederick Douglass, who is considered perhaps the most powerful speaker in the United States at this time, right, was invited to be on the dais with Grant,
And
as
say nothing, right?
but to say nothing. But he
Yeah.
almost didn't even make that place because the Philadelphia police officer did not believe that a black man, he said it in a less generous way, was supposed to be on stage. And if it wasn't for one of the organizers who saw the big hair of Douglas out in the
Right. The
audience, he
rather
would have never
distinctive.
made it in.
Yeah.
So, and Douglas had lived through this contradiction. Remember, he was a slave. He lived long, he escaped. He lived long enough to see the Emancipation Proclamation signed, the Civil War, the 13th Amendment ratified, 14th and 15th Amendments ratified, and then he lived long enough to see the first Jim Crow laws. He would call his friends and many of the folks who were anti-slavery, he would call them the apostles of forgetfulness, right? So that story required the erasure of black folk. But we always spoke back. 1926 with Calvin Coolidge. He's making an argument that MAGA will give an evangelical twist to, that we don't need to talk about more perfect union at all. Our salvation was secured in the founding. Perfection was evidenced there. That's all we need to do is to remember and restore. And he's
Yeah.
saying this in the midst of unimaginable violence. Lynching is happening at rates in the South that are mind blowing. Red Summer of 1919. We can begin to talk about, the reign of terror of the Klan itself, which was reborn in 1915.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so at each of these
Yeah.
moments, there's this attempt to narrate the story, but it requires the banishment of its contradiction, which means us.
Right. Either the banishment, in some literal sense, we're just not going to talk about that, or this sense that that's not worth talking about anymore because we're done. We got there. And that's really the thing, again, that this moment, you said it earlier and so well, it it is both unprecedented and absolutely of a piece with what we have seen before. To my mind, like so many other things about the Trump administration, it's just whatever it is on steroids. It
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, something that again is familiar, but it has never been taken to this degree or been done so brazenly, et cetera. And I just want to pause and recognize one other thing in the story that you told about Frederick Douglass, because I think it is such a great story to encompass the arguments that you're making, in that you have a person who, even at that moment in time, was supposed to be up on the dais with the president of the United States, right? Frederick Douglass is an important person in that moment. And I'm sure that he was recognized even then as somebody who would be in history books, who we would learn about in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's a black man, a an officer who knows not just a typical police officer could have, been more powerful in that culture than the most powerful black intellectual in the moment.
Absolutely.
And for for you're recounting a story that happened. You're not making a fable. You're not writing a short story that includes these characters to make a point. No, you are picking a story that of something that really happened that again distills this madness to that you refer to that place where a guy, a schmo, frankly, just doing his job is empowered to say, you're not going in there. There's no way.
And what's so fascinating about it is that that moment gets repeated with regards to the president of Haiti. U.S. occupied Haiti invites the president of Haiti to come to participate in the 1926 exposition. His driver is driving up, and a Philadelphia police officer says, you know, they tell him that he's the president of Haiti, he's supposed to be on, and he says, I guess you're going to tell me that Ulysses Grant is coming next. And so he had to pay to get in. He had to pay to get in, and he was found sitting at a hot dog stand eating a hot dog because of ordinary white Philadelphia police officer did not accord him any dignity and standing because he was a black man. A repetition that's different, but it's a repetition
Oh
nonetheless.
my goodness. Yes, it is different in detail, but not in overall shape and scope, that's for sure.
Indeed, indeed.
So what I don't want to take too much more of your time. I really
Sure.
appreciate the conversation. What do you say because people see you on TV, people see that you write bestsellers, people
Mhm,
understand if they take you in at all, either the books or your appearances, they understand where you're coming from.
mhm,
I would think that you are. So, if you don't mind, I will just make a slight analogy to Heather Cox Richardson, right? Who
mhm,
is somebody who has, I don't know how reluctantly she got thrust into the public spotlight through the fact that in the first Trump administration, for a lot of us, she was a person who could take our dread and say, "Hey, guess what? This kind of thing has happened before. Let's have some perspective," all that kind of thing.
mhm,
Now she has been drawn in this second Trump presidency more and more into exactly what I think you've been drawn into, which is looking at every day's events and
mhm,
having to answer to people who trust you to try and make sense of it, to try and provide some kind of either solace, perspective,
mhm.
inspiration, etc. Surely you find yourself in that position a lot.
Yeah.
How is that for you, and what can you say to folks? What do you say to
It's some days it's a cross to bear because you want to give voice to your own sense of despair, your own sense of dread. Um, that some days I just want to scream, I just want to curse out loud on television, and some days I do. Um, because we're in the 250th year of this nation and we're still dealing with this shit.
It's
And
yeah, and in many ways worse. But
yeah,
anyway.
so I guess part of what I have to do is to kind of be human, to be truthful and authentic, um, to speak as clearly as I can, and passionately as I can, with the understanding that I don't have all the answers, but just to open up space for us to think together. I do say this at the end of the book. I refuse the kind of the standard invitation. That standard invitation is in the American melodrama is that you get to the problem and then you offer the resolution. Everything is going to be all right if we only do this, that, and the other. And instead of offering a kind of blueprint for what we need to do, um, moving forward, I say we just need to make a choice. We need to make a moral choice. Either we're going to be a beacon of freedom or a white republic, because we can't be both. We can debate about what the beacon of freedom might mean in its detail,
Hmm.
but what we
That's
know,
what, yeah, when we're functioning, right, that's what's happening.
but what we know we cannot do is to be both of these at once. And then there's that line from the student. I can't get over this. It was in her paper, and I have the very controversial first sentence. I'm not going to read it for the folks, but it's about this relationship between love and country. And I had this student in my Baldwin seminar who was one day, she was from Texas. She's a neuroscience major, beautiful young woman, wonderful spirit. That's what I mean. And
Hmm.
and she said, some days I just love the country, and then some days I just can't stand it. And so she's reading Baldwin, and she's trying to track and chart his notion of love over the course of his life. And she goes, this is the paragraph, but love breaks through. Not some sentimentalized love of country that can easily slip into a kind of idolatry that makes one monstrous. This is me. But the love
Hmm.
of people close to the ground who give this place meaning and purpose. The love that motivated slaves to imagine a future as a free people when nothing about their experience suggested that such a future could be possible. The love that announces hatred must never have the last word. The last sentence of my student's final paper about Baldwin's view of love may serve as a balm for, for Secretary Bunch's fearful conclusion, or for us, as it has for me. What remains, she wrote, is not hope, but something just as lasting: the insistence on truth, carried by love and lit by rage.
What a fabulous distillation of a lot of complex threads. Uh, that's quite something, and obviously you had a nose for that one, and like, oh yeah.
When I read it, I got up and started pacing. And I told her, I asked her permission, and I said, I won't mention your name because I don't want you to get a whole bunch of blowback. But this is exactly how I feel in this moment, right? We have to tell the truth with love, but lit by rage.
Yeah, I mean, and that really, again, the the madness of the contradictions that you are exploring all the time is, it contains the fact that there can be genuine love and genuine rage going on at the same time.
My man.
And and uh, that is a piece of wisdom that deserves to be shared. So I know that you are on your own form of a crusade, just to bring in a slightly religious analogy, um, to do so. And I salute you for it, and I support you in it, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
That means the
and
world to me. Appreciate you.
Dr. Glaude, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And you take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Carry on, and we'll see you soon. Safe travels.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.